Just very quickly, our wonderful colleague from Kansas said that all this is really about is preventing states and localities from impeding immigration law enforcement. The word impede does not appear anywhere in this bill, nor do any of its synonyms that I could find, including stymie, obstruct, handicap, disrupt, encumber, interfere, constrain, and so on. What it does is it invents, for the first time to my knowledge in the history of our country, a right of a local or state official who's elected locally or by the state population and whose salary is paid for by the local government in the state, a right to spend as much time as they want, apparently, enforcing federal law. Again, this goes way beyond what people are talking about in terms of a detainer. And I will quote you the section that I think we need to focus on. What it says is the right of any federal, state, or local government entity or official or other personnel to comply with or enforce the immigration laws. Now, where does the Congress, and I'm happy to turn over to Mr. Schmidt if I've got any time, where does the Congress get the authority to tell a state or local government that its officials have a right to be spending their time enforcing a federal law or mandate?
I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. We will recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, and if we can yield some time to, if you have it, we'll yield some time to the gentleman from Kansas. But gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Yeah, we should have a little time, Mr. Chairman. So yes, I would like to echo this newfound respect for the 10th Amendment. It is truly notable. And the respect for Justice Alito. Yeah. Boy, this is great to hear this. And I would just say to my colleagues on the other side, I hope you share this enthusiasm for the 10th Amendment with my colleagues over in the Natural Resources Committee. It would really be great if that 10th Amendment was emphasized with natural resources in the same way that we're hearing that in the Judiciary Committee.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I will not. I've got plenty to say here. Since when have we become a country that's going to selectively enforce our laws here in the United States? I mean, that's really, to me, at the heart of this question, because there's real consequences as a result of this. I'd list an example in my home state of Wisconsin. In Prairie du Chien, it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, a woman was beat to a pulp by a Tren de Aragua gang member. Well, guess where this Tren de Aragua gang member domiciled? He domiciled in Dane County, Wisconsin, a sanctuary county. And that's the threat to people who are in these sanctuary communities, is that someone that wants to commit crime, as this gang member did, he had multiple charges filed against him over the years, they know they can hide out in these sanctuary communities. It threatens the safety of these people. But Mr. Chairman, I would just add this. I think back, let's go in the way back machine 10, 20 years ago. How many times, I sat in the state legislature, how many times did we hear local and state officials say, it's the federal government's job to deal with this immigration problem. They've got to fix it. Well, guess what? Somebody has finally decided to fix it, and now they don't want to support those that have chosen to do something about it. And I want to make an additive comment to my colleague from California, just to my left here. Crime is down 20%, violent crime down 20% last year. And to tell the American people that illegal immigrants commit less crime than Americans flies in the face of that data that we are seeing. What's one of the main things that happened here in 2025 in terms of federal policy? People were removed from this country, especially if you remember what Mr. Holman said. The first people we are going to remove are those who are here illegally but committed violent crimes in their home country or here in the United States of America. Those are the first people that we are going to remove. There is a reason crime is down, and in part, it is because illegal immigrants who have committed violent crime are being removed from our country. I'll yield back.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'll yield back to the chairman here for the balance of my.
Let's, if you're okay, let's let.
I'm happy to yield to Mr.
I'll jump in here in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points in response to my friend, the professor from Maryland.
First of all, with respect to the language he pointed to in the detainer section, I believe the way I read that language is, again, it doesn't require or attempt to compel states to enforce federal immigration law. It says that states may not impede their law enforcement officers or locals from enforcing a federal immigration law. And the question was, where does that authority come from? And I would point, for example, to Section 287G, where you may have a voluntary agreement for state law enforcement officers. They have chosen to voluntarily participate in the enforcement of federal law. This would preclude, for example, the state that may have a sanctuary philosophy from precluding a local jurisdiction where a sheriff or others may not have a sanctuary philosophy from participating voluntarily in the enforcement of federal law as Congress has authorized. Secondly, with respect to the thesaurus debate that we were having about the word, what was it, impede, I would point my friend to page 2, lines 20 and 21, where it's defining the types of law enforcement activities that would be protected, can't be prohibited or restricted from participating in federal law. That isn't impede, but it's pretty darn close. I think that's a fair summary. And the final point I'd just make, I guess more with respect to our friend from Washington, look, here's what's going on here. What we are trying to get, as again Mr. Holman has said, I think he has the right philosophy and approach in enforcing this. What we are trying to get is cooperative enforcement, where all the good guys are on the same page, pulling the same way. And you don't have local politicians telling local law enforcement officers, you may not cooperate with your federal brethren. We want to leave that judgment to our good local law enforcement officers who can balance out when is the right time to cooperate and when is the right time to give more weight to, for example, the effect on the local community. They may know that best, but certainly the folks in the local political circles don't, and it is proper for us to say that. I would yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes, who seeks recognition? Gentleman from California is recognized.
This gentleman?
That gentleman, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman is definitely a gentleman, yeah.
Just wanted to talk about a little bit about all good guys working on the same side. Like I said yesterday, Orange County, small little county in California, sanctuary state. Like I said yesterday, last year, ICE detainers, 323 individuals referred to ICE. 52 of them were never picked up. So I think what's important to do is make sure that we're taking care of business, where we talk about not cooperating with federal enforcement. And these are the worst of the worst. My local sheriff, Barnes, has said, it's a one-way street. Feds don't cooperate with me, don't call me when they're doing operations. Very frustrating. But let's really talk about sovereignty, state rights. Look, federal government hasn't addressed immigration reform for what, 40 years? Last one was that great Californian Ronald Reagan that did something. So states have taken upon themselves, like California, to address immigration reform. And it's really a selfish thing we do because we're protecting our economic interests in the state of California. We're the 4th largest economy in the world. We are the biggest ag state in the union. We're the biggest light manufacturer in the union. We're the biggest venture capital state in the union, 65%. We lead the nation in bio, chip manufacturing, and these are all sectors that have a lot of immigrants working. If this country wanted to lead the state's immigration reform, and to my colleague, Mr. Tiffany from Wisconsin, last I looked, 90% of the dairy workers at dairy farms in Wisconsin were undocumented. So let's really lead and fix the problem. That's really what we're talking about right now, is undocumented immigration in this country. They're not all criminals. Those that are should be taken care of. Move on. Don't need you here. But those that are hard workers, we are not addressing. And I can tell you right now, home manufacturers, home builders in this country, deep south, I know right now are pissed because they can't deliver their products on time, and they're going to be asking you for a solution, which all of us should come up with. So, but I got to tell you, I have an even better solution to the issue of undocumented. Instead of trying to run up all these folks, go after the employers. Pass E-Verify. Put major penalties on the employers You're going to see those jobs disappear. Our economy is going to shrink, absolutely. We're going to lose a lot of economic muscle, but as a nation, we have to decide who we are. Do we want to be a strong economic nation, or do we want to just be another Japan and go about that route? So, folks, willing to work with you on these solutions, but again, sovereignty, state of California, trying to do what's good for Californians. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we pay $80 billion more per year to the federal government than we get back. So you know what we can do? We can also cut a deal here, which is you stop taking our federal dollars, leave us alone, and we won't take the federal money that the federal government gives us. We'll be $80 billion ahead of the curve. But when you talk about economic growth, that means paying federal taxes. That means being the fourth largest economy within the largest economy in the world. That's what it's about. My ranking member, did you want to have some comments? You wanted some
Well,
words?
I was gripped actually by your remarks. I mean, that was a very powerful argument, and I thank you for making it. I wanted to reply to my friend, the former Attorney General of Kansas. Again, the bill is being characterized as preventing the impeding of federal immigration law enforcement. What you quoted back to me was about what shall not be prohibited or in any way restricted was the right of a state or local government employee who reports to a different part of the government to be enforcing a federal law. But I don't understand where that right comes from. If it's a constitutional right, you don't need this bill. They can just go sue. Of course, it's not constitutional. We're creating for the first time a federal statutory right of a local government employee not to be following their orders for what they should be working on in their time, and instead working to enforce a federal mandate. And if it can be done for this, it can be done just as much for gun control and background checks.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, Mr. Raskin, and I'll be happy to yield to Mr. Schmidt as well, but should states have the authority to make compliance with detainers illegal?
Illegal, like a crime to do that? No.
That's what sanctuary.
In other words, I don't think it can. First of all, you got to explain to me what you mean comply with the detainer, because I understand what's been happening in a lot of these cases is the local government is being asked to hold somebody beyond their stay in prison. They've been sued for that, and they're saying we cannot take the liability.
That's not uniform. I'm just saying in certain states. I'm not trying to be petulant. I just want to get down to the issue. But can a state preclude local law enforcement or local sovereigns from honoring federal detainers?
Again, but you've got to give me the specific example of what you mean from when you say honoring a federal detainer.
Hypothetically, let's say.
So, I mean, if the federal government is saying we're going to come pick somebody up while they're still, their term of is still
within the parameter.
Within their term, then I would say that I think that is very much at the edge, if not over the edge. But do you think that the federal government can compel a state or local government to hold somebody beyond their term in potential violation of due process in order to hand them over to the federal government? Because that's what they're saying on the other side, again, on the detainer issue, which I think is a small part of this.
Well, the sanctuary jurisdictions that I have the most concern with is they preclude any adherence to detainers. They make it illegal for local sovereigns to engage with federal immigration at any level. And they are precluded from keeping people who are lawfully arrested under state law, from keeping them in custody.
Yes.
And then holding them for law enforcement at the federal level.
All right, well, I have profound policy problems with that. And constitutionally, I would think that the federal government, if, for example, if a local government were to say, we're going to let somebody out of jail early in order to escape the federal government, I think that would raise profound problems. But this legislation goes way beyond that. What it's saying is that every local government employee in the country essentially works for ICE now and works for Homeland Security. And again, if you can do it for ICE and Homeland Security, you can do it for the ATF and the FBI with respect to background checks.
Well, reasonable minds can differ about the language, but The issue that I have, again, is the preclusion of any cooperation with federal law enforcement. And Mr. Schmidt, if you
Well, I
want
would,
to.
if the gentleman, if just for a second,
yield.
I believe that's exactly the situation that exists in the counties. I'm seeing, we're not taking public testimony today, but that's exactly the situation that exists with these local law enforcement people in the state of Maryland. They want to, they had the agreement, and the state said, no, you can't.
My colleague from Kansas, do you wish the remainder of my time?
Sure, I would thank
I'm
you.
happy to yield it to you.
Thank you. I appreciate the gentleman from North Carolina, and just
Thank you, Mr. Raskin. Thank you.
not to, we are marking up a bill, so not to get too far down in the weeds, but, to stay on that spirit. I believe, Mr. Chairman, the current state of play is we are on the amendment from the gentleman from Georgia, which does not relate directly to the anti-commandeering arguments. It does relate to the unconstitutional condition arguments, and with respect to the linkage that my friend from Maryland talked about, I would point into page 5, line 14, for example, which is in the language to be stricken by the Georgia amendment, that ties the condition on funds back to subsection A or subsection B, which is where the language is we've been talking. So they are connected. It's not one or the other. And I think it's permissible for the reasons we've already talked about. I don't know if that's satisfactory to my friend, but at least that's where we're disagreeing.
It's illuminating nonetheless. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would yield to whoever I should yield to.
I think the time belongs in, can the gentleman yield to me? Yep, I appreciate it. I just wanted to try to get his focus back on, I appreciate all the arguments here, and I think they are important, but I think when the sponsor of the amendment first offered the amendment, she talked about bullying states. She said that this would make it worse. This is designed to make it better. And what we heard yesterday was 17,864 times in 1 year in sanctuary jurisdictions, a detainer was filed while that illegal migrant was in custody charged with some other crime, and that individual was released. And remember, that only applies to a third of the country, because 2/3 of the country, someone else said that this, most of the country, I think Mr. Tippett saying most of the country doesn't want this. Most of the country doesn't have to deal with this, because most of the country honors these things. But in a third of the country, 17,864 times those detainers were not honored, and the guy who should have been turned over to ICE was released, and many times went out and harmed someone. That is what this is focused on. As the gentleman from Kansas said, as the sponsor said, that is the focus, and if we can pass this, I think we can make a real difference. Gentleman from North Carolina is not here, but I know he yields back. Question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from
Word quickly.
Okay, gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you. I mean, the 10th Amendment, and as we are referring directly to the amendment, I mean, it still comes back that within the 10th Amendment, it still says immigration is treated as a federal power because it relates to foreign policy or national borders or international relations. So I think that's kind of being lost as to why the discussion over the 10th Amendment, to me, it doesn't make much sense, because it clearly is something that the federal government has been given the responsibility to handle across all 50 states and territories. And Mr. Biggs may remember, because as recently as 2012, Supreme Court did take up Arizona versus United States. And in that instance, what was argued was that there were certain parts of that Arizona statute that were admissible and were okay as a result of the 10th Amendment, and other parts that were struck down because of Arizona's immigration law. It clearly interfered with federal authority. So I don't, the bright line I don't think exists as we're kind of laying it out there today. So, what I would say is you can't, they can ignore the federal government, municipalities, like the city of Madison. They don't call it sanctuary city, they call themselves an open and welcoming city. So they just have redefined sanctuary city and include in that they're not holding people in jail solely for immigration authorities unless there is a warrant. They're not asking about immigration status when there's an arrest. They're not using local resources to enforce federal immigration law. and it's limited information sharing with immigration officials. It's not a give and take kind of dialogue that's happening. So I guess what I would say in regards to the amendment is you can't have it both ways. They can ignore the federal government and just not do anything. But this is an elected body that went as far to pass ordinances in this case. But they can organize and legislate to kind of prevent this municipality from participating. But it still falls down to the federal government. We have a responsibility to make sure that this works. And if we're simply going to say, listen, this is not something that the states need to be concerned about, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's why I think you should vote no on this amendment.
Well, would the gentleman yield?
I do.
I just wanted to respond to something that we heard from the Democrats. The gentlelady from Washington, I think, said it best. Sanctuaries are not impeding enforcement. They're simply not cooperating with enforcement. Well, if they're not cooperating with law enforcement, why are we giving them law enforcement funds? Do the Democrats contend that the federal government no longer has the authority to condition the use of federal funds provided to the states? Highway funds, for example. Do the Democrats contend that a state now has a right to refuse to enforce federal transportation regulations and still qualify to receive federal highway funds? Are universities now free to accept federal funds while they ignore Title IX? Remember, they wouldn't be impeding Title IX, they just wouldn't be enforcing it. And how about Medicaid funds? Can states now spend those funds while ignoring the laws that regulate the use of those funds? This is absurd. And it seems confusing at first because it's so manifestly contradictory with the position that the Democrats have taken in the past, but it shouldn't be confusing because there is one consistent theme that runs through all of these legal contortions. The Democrats do not want criminal illegal aliens deported from this country. They want them returned to our neighborhoods. There should be no confusion once you understand that simple fact. Their position then becomes entirely consistent. I yield back.